The cold in Sector J7 wasn't the kind that killed you quickly. It was the slow, grinding cold that seeped through thermal layers and settled in your bones, making every breath feel like inhaling broken glass. Davin Morik pulled his scarf tighter across his face as he navigated the narrow corridors between collapsed market stalls, his breath forming clouds that vanished into the perpetual gray mist. He'd lived in the outer Reach colony for 12 years now, watching it decay one failed system at a time. The archive facility where he worked had been shut down 3 years ago, its data core stripped and sold off-world. Now he occupied a corner of the building, alone, maintaining records no one would ever read, accepting meager supply credits just to justify his existence in the housing registry. The market district had once been vibrant, or so the old-timers claimed. Now it was a graveyard of commerce, where desperate souls traded whatever they could scavenge. Davin came here twice weekly, hunting for protein packs that hadn't expired or power cells that might hold a charge. He kept to the main corridors, never venturing past the red-marked zones. But tonight, something was different. A heat signature pulsed on his wrist display, emanating from deep within subsector J7G. Active generators. That meant traders, and traders this far out meant illegal goods. Davin should have turned back, should have returned to his small room with its flickering wall heater and stack of ancient data slates. Instead, his feet carried him forward. The auction house revealed itself, gradually through the mist, a prefabricated structure that had once been a shipping depot, now repurposed into something far uglier. Davin stepped through the entrance, and the temperature immediately rose. Generator heat washed over him, almost painful after the exterior cold. The space was small, maybe 20 meters across. Display pedestals stood empty, their screens cracked or missing entirely. But along the far wall, he saw them, containment units. Most stood open, their occupants already sold or moved. But one remained sealed, frost clinging to its transparent door. Inside, a woman knelt. Davin's breath caught. She was Zypheran, or at least partially one of the hybrid species that resulted from the early colony integration programs. Her skin held an otherworldly luminescence, pale blue like deep ice, and her hair fell in waves of silver white past her shoulders. She wore almost nothing, just strips of thermal fabric that barely qualified as clothing. Her hands were bound at the wrists with electromagnetic restraints, and her eyes silver with rings of deeper blue stared forward with the blank expression of someone who had learned that hope was dangerous. A man sat beside a portable heater near the back wall, barely looking up as Davin approached. He was thick-set, wearing a merchant's vest over thermal gear that was far too clean for this sector. "Late for browsing," the man said, not bothering to stand. "I'm packing up in 10 minutes. Davin forced his voice steady. "That one's still sealed." "Yeah, problem goods." The merchant exhaled smoke from a vapor stick. "Beautiful to look at, but she's got no training. Bit a client, refused conditioning. Was supposed to go to domestic service, but nobody wants to break in something that fights back." Davin moved closer to the containment unit. The woman's eyes tracked his movement now, watching him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Up close, he could see the bruises along her arms, the raw patches on her ankles where previous restraints had chafed. What happens to her if she doesn't sell? The merchant shrugged. Processing facility. They pay by weight. Hybrid genetics fetch decent rates for medical research. Or she goes to the meat markets. Some of the fringe stations don't care about species classification. Davin felt something twist in his chest. That's murder. That's economics. The merchant finally looked at him properly. "You want her or not?" "I've got quotas to meet." Davin stared at the woman. She stared back. Her lips moved, forming words the containment unit muffled. He leaned closer, pressing his hand against the frosted door. "Please." Her voice came through thin and distorted. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't let them process me." "How much?" Gavin heard himself say. 400 credits. Final price. Davin's entire monthly allocation was 300. He had maybe 200 in reserve, saved over months of rationing. "I have 350. The merchant studied him, then smiled without warmth. "You're not a regular buyer, are you? First time? Does it matter?" "Not really." The merchant pulled out a transaction pad. 350. Transfer now, and I wipe the acquisition record. She becomes your problem, not mine. Davin's hands shook as he authorized the transfer. His life savings gone in seconds. The containment unit hissed as the seal released and the door swung open. The woman didn't move immediately, as if she didn't believe it was real. "Come on," Davin said quietly, "before he changes his mind." She stood on unsteady legs, and he realized just how tall she was, nearly his height, with the lean muscle of someone who'd known physical labor. He stripped off his outer coat and draped it over her shoulders. She grabbed it with bound hands, pulling it tight around herself. The merchant tossed him a key fob. Restraint release code. 30-day activation window. After that, they're permanent unless you pay for removal. Davin pocketed the fob and guided her toward the exit. She walked beside him, barefoot on the frozen ground, not speaking. He didn't know what to say either. What did you say to someone you just purchased? Someone whose life you now held in your hands by virtue of a transaction that made him sick to think about? The walk back to his building took 20 minutes. She never complained about the cold, never asked where they were going. She just walked, one foot in front of the other, his coat dragging in the slush behind her. His apartment was on the 4th floor of what had once been administrative housing. The door stuck as always, and he had to shoulder it open. Inside, the temperature was barely warmer than outside. His heat allocation only covered minimal cycling. She stood just inside the threshold, still clutching the coat. Her eyes swept the space, the single room with its makeshift partitions, the salvaged furniture, the walls lined with data slates and old books. It wasn't much. It was barely anything. "You can sit," he said, gesturing to the worn cushions near the heater. She didn't move. Davin activated the heater, then pulled out a ration pack from his storage box. He heated it in the processor reconstituted grain and protein paste. Nothing appetizing, but it was warm, and it was food. He set it on the low table. "You should eat." She finally moved, but instead of sitting on the cushions, she lowered herself to the floor, kneeling. The coat fell open slightly. She didn't reach for the food. "Is it drugged?" Her voice was hoarse. "No." She studied the food for a long moment, then picked it up and ate quickly, mechanically, like someone who'd learned not to trust when the next meal might come. Davin sat across from her, watching. Now that they were in better light, he could see more details. The way her skin seemed to shimmer slightly in the heater's glow. The delicate bone structure of her face. The silver tracings that ran along her collarbones like natural tattoos. When she finished, she set the container down and looked at him directly. "What do you want me to do?" The question hung in the air. "Nothing," he said. "Rest, you're safe here. Safe." She repeated the word like it was foreign. "What's your name?" "Davin. Davin." She nodded slowly. "Mine is Celine." "Celine," he echoed. Silence settled between them. The heater hummed. Outside, wind rattled the windows. "The restraints," she said, holding up her bound wrists. "Will you remove them?" He pulled out the key fob the merchant had given him. "Yes, hold still." She extended her arms, and he activated the release code. The electromagnetic cuffs split open with a soft click, falling away. The skin beneath was raw, marked with pressure wounds. She rubbed her wrists slowly, as if not quite believing they were free. "Thank you," she whispered. Davin wanted to say something profound, something that would make sense of what he'd done. But he had no answers. He'd acted on impulse, on something he couldn't name compassion, perhaps, or loneliness, or the simple inability to walk away from suffering when he'd looked into her eyes. "There's a sleeping area behind that partition," he said, pointing. "It's not much, but it's warm. You can rest there." Celine stood slowly. She looked at the partition, then back at him. "And you?" "I'll stay out here." She nodded, then moved toward the sleeping area. But she paused at the partition, turning back. "Davin?" "Yes?" "You didn't ask me what I could do for you." "I know." Her silver eyes held his for a long moment, searching for something, a trap's or a hidden demand. When she found neither, something in her expression shifted. Not quite trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. She disappeared behind the partition, and Davin heard the soft sound of her settling onto the sleeping mat. He remained by the heater, staring at his hands, wondering what he'd just done. He'd saved a life, yes, but he'd also bound that life to his own, and he had no idea what came next. In the darkness, he heard her voice, barely audible. "I thought I was already dead." Davin closed his eyes. "You're not dead. Not anymore." The heater cycled down, and the apartment fell into quiet. Outside, the colony continued its slow decay. But inside, in this small room, something fragile and uncertain had begun a chance. Perhaps for two people who'd been forgotten by the world to remember what it meant to be human. Or at least to try. Morning arrived without fanfare in Sector J7. There was no real sunrise this deep in the colony's interior levels. Just a gradual shift from black to gray as the overhead lighting grids powered up on their automated cycles. Davin woke to find his neck stiff from sleeping propped against the wall. His thermal blanket twisted around his legs. The apartment was quiet, but not empty. He could sense Celine's presence even before he saw her. She knelt beside the small hygiene station, using a cloth to wash herself with water she'd somehow heated in the basin. His coat lay folded neatly on the chair. The sleeping mat behind the partition had been straightened. Even the food containers from last night were cleaned and stacked by the processor. Davin watched her for a moment before she noticed him. Her movements were methodical, practiced the ritual of someone who'd learned to maintain dignity in situations where dignity was stripped away. The thermal wrappings she wore were minimal, and in the dim light, her blue-tinted skin seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. She turned, sensing his gaze, and immediately went still. Not frozen in fear, but alert, waiting. "You didn't have to clean," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "I know." She wrung out the cloth. "But I needed something to do." Davin stood, stretching his back. Every joint protested. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." She paused. "You left the restraint release code active." "I could have left." "Yes. Why didn't you lock me in?" He moved to the small storage unit, pulling out another ration pack. "Because you're not a prisoner." Celine stood, wrapping her arms around herself despite the apartment's relative warmth. "Then what am I?" It was a question Davin had asked himself through most of the sleepless night. He activated the food processor, watching the pack heat. "I don't know. Someone who needed help. Someone I couldn't leave behind. That's not sustainable." Her voice was quiet but firm. "You spent your credits on me. Resources are limited here. Eventually, you'll want something in return. Maybe." He pulled the heated pack out and divided it between two containers. "But not what you're thinking." She accepted the food, but didn't eat immediately. Instead, she sat on the floor cushion, studying him with those unsettling silver eyes. "You're different from the others." "What others?" "The men who looked at me in the auction houses. The ones who handled me during processing. The client who purchased me before." She stopped, her jaw tightening. "They all wanted the same things. Use, control, possession. You look at me, but you look at my face." Davin felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm not blind, Celine. I see all of you. But seeing and taking are different things." She took a bite of food, chewing slowly. "In my experience, the difference doesn't last long." They ate in silence after that. Davin noticed she was more relaxed than last night, her shoulders less rigid, her breathing steadier. But there was still a wariness in how she positioned herself. Always aware of the exits, always maintaining distance. After breakfast, he showed her how to operate the basic systems, the hygiene station, the heater controls, the door locks. She absorbed everything quickly, her intelligence evident in how she asked questions about the building's infrastructure and the colony's layout. "How long have you been alone here?" she asked as he demonstrated the water filtration system. 3 years in this apartment. 12 in the colony. No family? No partner? Had a partner once. She left when the opportunities dried up. Smart woman. I was the fool who stayed. Celine traced her fingers along the exposed piping. "Why did you stay?" Davin leaned against the wall, considering. "Inertia, maybe. Or stubbornness. I kept thinking things would improve. That the colonial administration would send support, that the corporations would invest in rebuilding. But nobody cares about failed colonies. We're just a line item marked for liquidation. Then why not leave now? Where would I go? I've got no skills that translate off-world. No savings anymore." He smiled without humor. "Spent them on you." She flinched slightly at that. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was my choice." He pushed off the wall. "I need to check in at the archive facility today. Just a weekly system maintenance. Will you be all right here?" Something flickered across her face, fear, maybe, or abandonment anxiety. "How long?" "Few hours. There's food in storage, and the door locks from inside. Nobody will bother you. And if they do?" He pulled a small emergency comm unit from a drawer. "This connects directly to me. Press the red button if anything happens." She took the device, turning it over in her hands. "You're trusting me with this. I could signal someone, arrange a trade, sell the location. Could you?" Celine met his eyes. "No, I don't think I could. Then we're fine." He left her there, feeling the weight of that trust like a physical thing. The walk to the archive facility took 30 minutes through mostly abandoned corridors. The building stood like a mausoleum, its data banks dark, its workstations covered in dust. Davin ran his maintenance protocols mechanically, his mind elsewhere. He kept checking the comm unit, half expecting a distress signal. But it remained silent. When he returned, he found Celine exactly where he'd left her, sitting by the window with his coat wrapped around her shoulders. She'd been crying. He could see the dried tracks on her cheeks, but she'd composed herself before he entered. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes." She stood, folding the coat carefully. "I was just thinking." "About?" She hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "About the last time someone left me alone. It was in a holding facility before the auction. They said they'd come back. They didn't. Instead, they sent someone else. Someone who—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "When you didn't return immediately, I thought maybe this was the same. That you'd changed your mind, decided I wasn't worth the trouble." Davin set down the supply pack he'd brought. "I came back. You did." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why? Because I said I would. That's all?" He moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel his presence. Celine, I don't know what this is. I don't know what we're doing or where this goes. But I'm not going to abandon you. Not today, not tomorrow. You're not property I'm storing until I find a better use. Her breath hitched. Then what am I to you? Someone who deserves better than she's gotten. Someone I'd like to know, if you'll let me. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly reached out and touched his hand. Just her fingertips against his palm, testing. When he didn't pull away, she pressed her whole hand against his. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. This thing where I'm not performing or surviving. I don't know how to just ... be. Neither do I, he admitted. We'll figure it out together. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Davin would wake early, heat food, and they'd eat together while he told her about the archive facility, about the data he maintained that nobody read. She'd clean while he was gone, not out of obligation, she insisted, but because movement helped her think. When he returned, they'd talk, slowly, carefully. She began to share pieces of herself. She'd been born on a transport ship, she told him, the daughter of a human father and Zephyran mother who'd met during the integration programs. Her mother had died when she was young. Her father had sold her to a labor contractor when he couldn't afford her upkeep. She'd passed through 6 different owners in 8 years, each one promising something better and delivering something worse. The last one, she said one evening as they sat together by the heater. He ran what he called a hospitality service. Rich clients would pay for ... company. He said, I was too valuable to waste on regular labor, that my coloring made me exotic, desirable. Davin felt his jaw tighten. Did he tried. I broke his nose. That's when I got marked as non-compliant and sent to the auctions. She pulled her knees to her chest. The trader you bought me from, he said I'd used up my chances, that the processing facility was the only place left for something broken. You're not broken. She laughed, but it was hollow. Aren't I? I can't trust anyone. I flinch when you move too quickly. I wake up in the night, convinced this is all temporary, that tomorrow I'll be back in a cage. But you're here now. That's real. Is it? She turned to him, and her eyes were wet. How do I know this isn't just another transaction? That you're not waiting for me to feel safe before you take what you want? Davin set down the data slate he'd been reading. What would convince you? I don't know. Time, maybe. Consistency. Proof that you're not just being patient. Then I'll wait. As long as it takes. She studied his face in the heater's glow. You really mean that? Yes. Something shifted in her expression. She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Zephyrians ran hotter than humans, he'd learned. Her presence was like sitting near a thermal vent. Can I ask you something? She said, anything. Are you attracted to me? The question caught him off guard. He could have lied, could have deflected. Instead, he chose honesty. Yes? Since when? Since I first saw you in that cage. He met her eyes. But attraction doesn't mean entitlement. I can want something and still choose not to take it. She absorbed this and asked quietly, what if I wanted to give it? His heart hammered. That would depend on why. What do you mean? Are you offering because you want to? Or because you think you have to? Because those are very different things. Celine pulled back slightly, wrapping her arms around herself. I don't know. That's the problem. I've spent so long using my body as currency that I don't know how to separate desire from survival anymore. Then we wait, Davin said firmly, until you know for certain. Until there's no question. She looked at him with something like wonder. You'd really do that? Turn me down? I'd hate myself if I didn't. That night, for the first time, she slept without the partition closed. She arranged her mat closer to where he slept, close enough to reach out if she needed to. He lay awake listening to her breathing, feeling the torture of proximity and restraint. But beneath that torture was something else, a strange, fragile contentment. The knowledge that he was doing the right thing, even when it hurt. 3 weeks passed in this careful dance. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's boundaries. She started wearing more clothes, not because he asked, but because she felt safe enough to cover herself. He taught her to read the old data archives, and she surprised him with her quick comprehension. One evening, as they sat together reading, she suddenly closed her slate and turned to him. "Davin? I think I'm ready." He looked up. "Ready for what?" She reached out and took his hand, holding it firmly. To know the difference between surviving and living, between transaction and choice. She moved closer, and her silver eyes held his without fear. "I want you to touch me. Not because I'm paying you back, not because I'm afraid, but because I want to know what it feels like when it's real." His throat went dry. "Selene, I'm sure," she said. "For the first time in my life, I'm sure." Davin cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Her skin was warm, impossibly soft. "We go slow. The moment you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no consequences. I trust you." She whispered dot, and when he kissed her, gentle and careful, she kissed him back with a hunger that had nothing to do with obligation, and everything to do with a heart that was finally, tentatively, beginning to thaw.